Judo was created as a physical, mental and moral pedagogy in Japan, in 1882, by Kanō Jigorō. It is generally categorized as a modern martial art which later evolved into a combat and Olympic sport. Its most prominent feature is its competitive element, where the objective is to either throw or take down an opponent to the ground, immobilize or otherwise subdue an opponent with a pin, or force an opponent to submit with a joint lock or choke. Strikes and thrusts by hands and feet as well as weapons defenses are a part of Judo, but only in pre-arranged forms and are not allowed in Judo competition or free practice. A Judo practitioner is called a judoka. The philosophy and subsequent pedagogy developed for Judo became the model for other modern Japanese martial arts that developed from Koryu. The worldwide spread of Judo has led to the development of a number of offshoots such as Sambo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. History and philosophy. Early life of the founder. The early history of Judo is inseparable from its founder, Japanese polymath and educator Kanō Jigorō. Born Shinnosuke Jigorō, Kanō was born into a relatively affluent family. His father, Jirasaku, was the second son of the head priest of the Shinto Hiyoshi Shrine in Shiga Prefecture. He married Sadako Kanō, daughter of the owner of Kiku Masamune Sake Brewing Company, and was adopted by the family, changing his name to Kanō, and ultimately became an official in the shogunal government. Jigorō Kanō had an academic upbringing and, from the age of 7, he studied English, Judo and the 4 Confucian texts under a number of tutors. When he was 14, Kanō began boarding at an English medium school, Ikuagajuku in Shiba, Tokyo. The culture of bullying endemic at this school was the catalyst that caused Kanō to seek out a jujutsu dojo at which to train. Early attempts to find a jujutsu teacher who was willing to take him on met with little success. With the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate in the Meiji Restoration of 1868, jujutsu had become unfashionable in an increasingly westernized Japan. Many of those who had once taught the art had been forced out of teaching or become so disillusioned with it that they had simply given up. Nakai Amenari, an acquaintance of Kanō's father and a former soldier, agreed to show him kata, but not to teach him. The caretaker of Jirasaku's second house, Katajiri Yuji, also knew jujutsu, but would not teach it as he believed it was no longer of practical use. Another frequent visitor, Amai Genshiro of Kyushinyu School of Jujutsu, also refused. Several years passed before he finally found a willing teacher. In 1877, as a student at the Tokyo Kaisei School, Kanō learned that many jujutsu teachers had been forced to pursue alternative careers, frequently opening seikotsu in. After inquiring that a number of these, Kanō was referred to Fukuda Hashinosuke, a teacher of the Tenjin Shinryu of Jujutsu, who had a small 9-mat dojo where he taught 5 students. Fukuda is said to have emphasized technique over formal exercise, sowing the seeds of Kanō's emphasis on randori and judo. On Fukuda's death in 1880, Kanō, who had become his keenest and most able student in both randori and kata, was given the densho of the Fukuda dojo. Kanō chose to continue his studies at another Tenjin Shinryu school, that of Iso Masatomo. Iso placed more emphasis on the practice of kata, and entrusted randori instruction to assistants, increasingly to Kanō. Iso died in June 1881 and Kanō went on to study at the dojo of Ikubo Tsunetoshi of Kito-yu. Like Fukuda, Ikubo placed much emphasis on randori, with Kito-yu having a greater focus on Hwaza. Founding of the Kodokan in February 1882, Kanō founded a school and dojo at the Eishoji, a Buddhist temple in what was then the Shitaya ward of Tokyo. Ikubo, Kanō's Kito-yu instructor, attended the dojo 3 days a week to help teach, and although 2 years would pass before the temple would be called by the name Kodokan, and Kanō had not yet received his Menkyo in Kito-yu, this is now regarded as the Kodokan founding. The Eishoji dojo was a relatively small affair, consisting of a 12-mat training area. Kanō took in resident and non-resident students, the first 2 being Tomita Sunjiro and Shiro Saigo. In August the following year, the pair were granted Shodan grades, the first that had been awarded in any martial art. Judo versus Jujutsu. Central to Kanō's vision for Judo were the principles of Sairyoku Zenyo and Jita Kyoi. He illustrated the application of Sairyoku Zenyo with the concept of Juyoku Sisu. In short, resisting a more powerful opponent will result in your defeat, whilst adjusting to and evading your opponent's attack will cause him to lose his balance, his power will be reduced, and you will defeat him. This can apply whatever the relative values of power, thus making it possible for weaker opponents to beat significantly stronger ones. This is the theory of Juyoku Sisu. Kanō realized that Sairyoku Zenyo, initially conceived as a jujutsu concept, had a wider philosophical application. Coupled with the Confucianist-influenced Jita Kyoi, the wider application shaped the development of Judo from a bujutsu to a budo. Kanō rejected techniques that did not conform to these principles and emphasized the importance of efficiency in the execution of techniques. He was convinced that practice of jujutsu while conforming to these ideals was a route to self-improvement and the betterment of society in general. He was, however, acutely conscious of the Japanese public's negative perception of jujutsu. At the time, a few bujutsu experts still existed, but bujutsu was almost abandoned by the nation at large. Even if I wanted to teach jujitsu, most people had now stopped thinking about it. So I thought it better to teach under a different name, principally because my objectives were much wider than jujitsu. Kanō believed that jujutsu was insufficient to describe his art. Although jutsu means art or means, it implies a method consisting of a collection of physical techniques. Accordingly, he changed the second character to do, meaning way, road or path, which implies a more philosophical context than jutsu and has a common origin with the Chinese concept of Tao. Thus Kanō renamed it Judo. Judo Waza. There are 3 basic categories of Waza in Judo: Nash Waza, Katami Waza, and Atami Waza. Judo is most known for Nash Waza and Katami Waza. Judo practitioners typically devote a portion of each practice session to yukimi, in order that Nash Waza can be practiced without significant risk of injury. Several distinct types of yukimi exist, including Ushiro yukimi, Yoko yukimi, Mei yukimi, and Zenpo Kaitan yukimi. The person who performs a Waza is known as Tori, and the person to whom it is performed is known as Yu. Nash Waza and Nash Waza include all techniques in which Tori attempts to throw a trip-uke, usually with the aim of placing uke on his back. Each technique has 3 distinct stages: kuzushi, the initial balance break; sukuri, the act of turning in and fitting into the throw; kake, the execution and completion of the throw; dot, and Hwaza are typically drilled by the use of uchikomi, repeated turning in, taking the throw up to the point of K. Traditionally, Hwaza are further categorized into takedown throws that are performed with tori maintaining an upright position, and subdue throws in which tori sacrifices his upright position in order to throw uke. Takedown are further subdivided into takedown, in which tori predominantly uses his arms to throw uke, koshi-waza throws that predominantly use a lifting motion from the hips, and ashi-waza throws in which tori predominantly utilizes his legs. Katami-waza. Katami-waza is further categorized into osarakomi-waza, in which tori traps and pins uke on his back on the floor, shim-waza, in which tori attempts to force a submission by choking or strangling uke, and kansetsu-waza, in which tori attempts to submit uke by painful manipulation of his joints. A related concept is that of ni-waza, in which waza are applied from a non-standing position. In competitive judo, kansetsu waza is currently limited to elbow joint manipulation. Manipulation and locking of other joints can be found in various kata, such as katami no kata and Kodokan Goshin Jutsu. Atami-waza. Atami-waza are techniques in which tori disables uke with a strike to a vital point. Atami-waza are not permitted outside of kata. Pedagogy. Randori Judo pedagogy emphasizes randori. This term covers a variety of forms of practice, and the intensity at which it is carried out varies depending on intent and the level of expertise of the participants. At one extreme is a compliant style of randori, known as yakusoku geiko, in which neither participant offers resistance to their partner's attempts to throw. A related concept is that of suit geiko, in which an experienced judoka allows himself to be thrown by his less experienced partner. At the opposite extreme from yakusoku geiko is the hard style of randori that seeks to emulate the style of judo seen in competition. While hard randori is the cornerstone of judo, overemphasis of the competitive aspect is seen as undesirable by traditionalists if the intent of the randori is to win, rather than to learn. Randori is usually limited to either tachi-waza or ni-waza, and, when one partner is thrown in tachi-waza randori, practice is resumed with both partners on the feet. Kata are pre-arranged patterns of techniques and in judo, with the exception of the sairyokus and yokokumentaiku, they are all practiced with a partner. The purposes include illustrating the basic principles of judo, demonstrating the correct execution of a technique, teaching the philosophical tenets upon which judo is based, allowing for the practice of techniques that are not allowed in randori, and to preserve ancient techniques that are historically important but are no longer used in contemporary judo. There are 10 kata that are recognized by the Kodokan today: randori no kata, comprising 2 kata, and arch no kata 15 throws, practiced both left and right-handed, 3 each from the 5 categories of Hwaza, Te-waza, Koshi-waza, Ashi-waza, Masutami-waza, and Yoko-sutami-waza. Katami no kata. 15 techniques in 3 sets of 5, illustrating the 3 categories of katami-waza, osarakomi-waza, shim-waza, and kansetsu-waza. Hime no kata. 20 techniques, illustrating the principles of defense in a combat situation, performed from kneeling and standing positions. Attacks are made unarmed and armed with a dagger and a sword. This kata utilizes immobilize striking techniques that are forbidden in randori, Kodokan Goshinshitsu. The most recent recognized kata, comprising 21 techniques of defense against attack from an unarmed assailant and one armed with a knife, stick and pistol. This kata incorporates various jujutsu techniques such as wrist locks and immobilize. Judo kata. 15 techniques, arranged in 3 sets of 5, demonstrating the principle of Judo and its correct use in offense and defense. Go no kata, one of the oldest kata, comprising 10 forms that illustrate the efficient use of force and resistance. Now rarely practiced. Itsutsu no kata, an advanced kata, illustrating the principle of Sairyoku Zenyo and the movements of the universe. Recent research has shown that this kata, unlike what often has been claimed, was not created by Kanō, but similar to Koshiki no kata. It was merely imported into Judo after Kanō slightly amended it. The kata predates the creation of Kodokan and comes from Tenshin Shinryu. Koshiki no kata, derived from Kito Yujutsu. This kata was originally intended to be performed wearing armor. Kanō chose to preserve it as it embodied the principles of Judo. Sairyoku Zenyo Kekuman Taiku, a series of exercises designed to develop the physique for Judo. Joshi Goshinyo, an exercise completed in 1943, and of which the development was ordered by Jiro Nangard, the second Kodokan president. In addition, there are a number of commonly practiced kata that are not recognized by the Kodokan. Some of the more common kata include Go no Sen no kata, a kata of counter techniques developed at Waseda University in Tokyo, popularized in the West by Mikinosuke Kawaishi. An immobilize no kata, another kata of counter techniques, created by Kuzo Mifune. Immobilize no kata, a kata of counter attacks to controlling techniques, attributed to Kazuo Ito. Tandoku Renshu, personal work. Competitive Judo. History of competitive Judo. Shirei with Rendaku is a vitally important aspect of Judo. Early examples include the Kodokan Tsukanami-ji and the biannual Kowaku-ji, both of which started in 1884 and continue to the present day. In 1899, Kanō was asked to chair a committee of the Dai Nippon Butoku-kai to draw up the first formal set of contest rules for Jujutsu. These rules were intended to cover contests between various traditional schools of Jujutsu as well as practitioners of Kodokan Judo. Contests were 15 minutes long and were judged on the basis of immobilize and categorized, excluding immobilize. Wins were by 2 ippons, awarded in every form a different path of winning alternatives, by throwing, where the opponent's back strikes flat onto the mat with sufficient force, by pinning them on the back for a sufficient amount of time, or by submission, which could be achieved via immobilize or kansetsu, in which the opponent was forced to give himself or herself up a summon, a referee's a corner, judge's stoppage. Finger, toe and ankle locks were prohibited. In 1900, these rules were adopted by the Kodokan with amendments made to prohibit all joint locks for Kyu grades and added wrist locks to the prohibited kansetsu for dan grades. It was also stated that the ratio of tachiwaza to niwaza should be between 70% to 80% for Kyu grades and 60% to 70% for dan grades. In 1916, additional rulings were brought in to further limit kansetsu with the prohibition of ashigarami and neck locks, as well as tajimi. These were further added to in 1925, in response to Kosen Judo, which concentrated on niwaza at the expense of tachiwaza. The new rules banned all remaining joint locks except those applied to the elbow and prohibited the dragging down of an opponent to enter ni waza. The Zenahong Judo Senshukan Taikai were first held in 1930 and have been held every year, with the exception of the wartime period between 1941 and 1948, and continue to be the highest profile tournament in Japan. Judo's international profile was boosted by the introduction of the World Judo Championships in 1956. The championships were initially a fairly small affair, with 31 athletes attending from 21 countries in the first year. Competitors were exclusively male until the introduction of the Women's Championships in 1980, which took place on alternate years to the Men's Championships. The championships were combined in 1987 to create an event that takes place annually, except for the years in which Olympic Games are held. Participation has steadily increased such that, in the most recent championships in 2011, 871 competitors from 132 countries took part. The first time judo was seen in the Olympic Games was in an informal demonstration hosted by Kanō at the 1932 Games. However, Kanō was ambivalent about judo's potential inclusion as an Olympic sport. I have been asked by people of various sections as to the wisdom and possibility of judo being introduced with other games and sports at the Olympic Games. My view on the matter at present is rather passive. If it be the desire of other member countries, I have no objection, but I do not feel inclined to take any initiative. For one thing, judo in reality is not a mere sport or game. I regard it as a principle of life, art and science. In fact, it is a means for personal cultural attainment. Only one of the forms of judo training, so-called randori or free practice, can be classed as a form of sport. Certainly, to some extent, the same may be said of boxing and fencing, but today they are practiced and conducted as sports. Then the Olympic Games are so strongly flavored with nationalism that it is possible to be influenced by it and to develop contest judo. A retrograde form as jiu-jitsu was before the Kodokan was founded. Judo should be free as art and science from any external influences, political, national, racial, and financial or any other organized interest, and all things connected with it should be directed to its ultimate object, the benefit of humanity. Human sacrifice is a matter of ancient history. Nevertheless, judo became an Olympic sport for men in the 1964 Games in Tokyo. The Olympic Committee initially dropped judo for the 1968 Olympics, meeting protests. Dutchman Anton Geesink won the first Olympic gold medal in the open division of judo by defeating Okio Kaminaga of Japan. The women's event was introduced at the Olympics in 1988 as a demonstration event, and an official medal event in 1992. Paralympic judo has been a Paralympic sport since 1988. It is also one of the sports at the Special Olympics. Current international contest rules, the traditional rules of judo, are intended to provide a basis upon which to test skill in judo, while avoiding significant risk of injury to the competitors. Additionally, the rules are also intended to enforce proper regi. Penalties may be given for passivity or preventing progress in the match, for safety infringements, for example by using prohibited techniques, or for behavior that is deemed to be against the spirit of judo. Fighting must be stopped if a participant is outside the designated area on the mat. Weight divisions. There are currently 7 weight divisions, subject to change by governing bodies, and may be modified based on the age of the competitors. Competition scoring: a throw that places the opponent on his back with impetus and control scores an ippon, winning the contest. A lesser throw, where the opponent is thrown onto his back, but with insufficient force to merit an ippon, scores a wazari. 2 two scores of wazare equal a nippon wazare awase ippon. A throw that places the opponent onto his side scores a yuko. No amount of yukos equal a wazare. They are only considered in the event of an otherwise tied contest. Ippon is scored in ni wazade for pinning an opponent on his back with a recognized osarekomi wazade for 20 seconds or by forcing a submission through shim wazade kansetsu wazade. A submission is signaled by tapping the mat of the opponent at least twice with the hand or foot, or by saying mata. A pin lasting for less than 20 seconds, but more than 15 seconds scores wazare, and one lasting less than 15 seconds but more than 10 seconds scores the yuko. Formerly, there was an additional score that was lesser to yuko, that of koka. This has since been removed. If the scores are identical at the end of the match, the contest is resolved by the golden score rule. Golden score is a sudden death situation where the clock is reset to match time, and the first contestant to achieve any score wins. If there is no score during this period, then the winner is decided by hantei, the majority opinion of the referee and the two corner judges. There have been changes to the scoring. In January 2013, the hantei was removed and the golden score no longer has a time limit. The match would continue until a judoka scored through a technique or if the opponent is penalized. Penalties: minor rules infractions are penalized with a shido. This is treated as a warning, and anything up to 3 shido make no contribution to the overall score. A fourth shido, a serious rules violation, yields a hanzoku make, resulting in disqualification of the penalized competitor. Formerly, there were 2 additional levels of penalty between shido and hanzoku make: shui, equivalent to a yuko, and keikoku, equivalent to wazare. Representation of scores. Judo scoreboards show the number of wazare and yuko scores scored by each player. Often a nippon is not represented on the scoreboard, because upon award of a nippon the match is immediately terminated. Some computerized scoreboards will briefly indicate that a nippon has been scored. Scoreboards normally also show the number of penalties imposed on each player, and sometimes the number of medical visits for each. Electronic scoreboards also usually include timers for measuring both competition time and osarekomi time. In mixed martial arts, several judo practitioners have made an impact in mixed martial arts. Notable judo-trained MMA fighters include Olympic medalists Hidehiko Yoshida, Naoya Ogawa, Parel Nastula, Makoto Takamoto, Satoshi Ishii, and Ronda Rousey. Former Russian National Judo Championship bronze medalist Fedor Emelianenko, Karo Parisyan, Don Frye, Antonio Silva, Oleg Taktarov, Rick Horn, Hector Lombard, Yoshihiro Akiyama, and Dong Sikyun. Related arts and derivatives. Kanō Jigorō's Kodokan Judo is the most popular and well-known style of judo, but is not the only one. The terms judo and jujutsu were quite interchangeable in the early years, so some of these forms of judo are still known as jujutsu or jujitsu either for that reason, or simply to differentiate them from mainstream judo. From Kanō's original style of judo, several related forms have evolved, some now widely considered to be distinct arts. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In 1914, Mitsuyo Maeda introduced judo to Brazil. Maeda taught judo to Carlos Gracie and others in Brazil. The Gracie family named the development of judo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This style emphasized the nuance aspects of judo and retains many of the kansetsu wazade that were subsequently prohibited in competitive judo. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was popularized worldwide following its success in high-profile mixed martial arts tournaments in the 1990s. Kosen Judo. sometimes erroneously described as a separate style of judo. Kosen Judo is a competition rule set of Kodokan Judo that was popularized in the early 20th century for use in Japanese special high schools. Championships held at Kyoto Imperial University. The word Kosen is an acronym of Koto Senmon Gakko. Kosen Judo's focus on nuance has drawn comparisons with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Russian Judo. This distinctive style of judo was influenced by Sambo. It is represented by well-known coaches such as Alexander Rechinsky and Igor Yakimov, and mixed martial arts fighters such as Fedor Emelianenko and Karo Parisyan. In turn, Russian Judo has influenced mainstream Judo, with techniques such as the flying armbar being accepted into Kodokan Judo. Sambo. The Vasily Oshepkov was the first European judo black belt under Kanō. Oshepkov went on to contribute his knowledge of judo as one of the three founders of Sambo, which also integrated various international and Soviet bloc wrestling styles and other combative techniques. Oshepkov died during the political purges of 1937. In the history of Sambo, Brejak and Scott Anderson wrote that in Russia, judo and sambo were considered to be the same thing, albeit with a different uniform and some differences in the rules. Escrido. Several Filipino martial arts have been influenced by judo, but none more directly than Escrido.